Welcome to this session called Measuring Up to the Best. Are you globally capable? This is part of the Global Alliance's month of education and training, and welcome indeed. So my name is Professor Anne Gregory, and I'm the Research Director for the Global Capability Project. And I guess it's appropriate, given that we're an international audience here today, to be talking about global capability. And it's my pleasure to introduce this framework. The framework itself and the software that underpins it. I'll be showing you a demonstration of that. And I have to say, this has been a massive collaboration between academics, practitioners, the national associations, the Global Alliance, and employers from all around the world. It's been great fun, it's been a great challenge, and we've produced something that I believe to be massively worthwhile. So our practice does have differences in nuance and emphasis around the world, and it's good to celebrate that. And we've had to develop a framework that actually accommodates all those differences, and we found that we have an enormous amount in common. So I'd like now to introduce the framework to you. So the Global Capability Framework came about because members from the associations, that's you, asked for it. We need a common benchmark so that we can scope and describe our profession and the work that we do, and so that we have a common understanding of what it entails, whether we're based in Kenya or in Canada. And the Global Capability Framework is exactly that benchmark. And it's the only one that's in the world at the moment. And as I say, it's come about because of a load of work by you and your colleagues. And I should say that it's free, the software is free to you as association members, and the framework is free for anybody to observe. So I have to say that a challenging brief was given to us by the Global Alliance. And I'm just going to move on to the next slide. And here we are. So we were asked to offer a practical framework which was of value to the Global Alliance as a whole and all its membership organizations, a capability framework that was to reflect cultural variations across the world, and to be forward-looking in its approach. Many capability frameworks actually just capture the history and the current, but we wanted to project our profession forward into the future, and also to meet rigorous academic standards, because this has to be able to stand up to scrutiny. Now, when frameworks like this are developed, there are often two approaches. First of all, there's the competency approach, which looks at all the knowledge, skills, attributes and behaviours that a practitioner needs to be fully competent. And then we aggregate all these up into areas of practice, such as research, media expertise, political public relations, and so on. And sometimes this is called the micro to macro approach because it builds from the bottom upwards. But one of the drawbacks is that we often end up with long lists. And in fact, the Global Alliance did some preliminary research for the Capability Project, which looked at all the frameworks around the world to draw together all the knowledge, skills, and attributes that practitioners have. And we ended up with a document which was about 42 pages long. And so the board of the Global Alliance and the associations asked us to look at another approach which could make this a bit more manageable. So the capability approach is the second approach. And this asks if there's a minimum number of statements that describes and scopes our profession in all its richness and at its best, both now and into the future. Now, these capability frameworks are normally a short number of statements, and the reason that the statements are short and the framework is brief is because it allows some flexibility in interpretation. And you'll see that as I introduce the framework to you. And it allows people who are working, for example, in Asia to accommodate the nuances and cultural richness of operating in Asia, which is different from operating in Latin America. This is often called the macro to micro approach, and it's the one that we decided to take. So capability is based on the work of Amartya Sen, a Nobel-winning economist and a prize-winning economist, and philosopher Martha Nussbaum. They looked at development in countries, and they believe that just making a financial measure of somebody's development potential was not good enough, and what needed to be captured was the potential of a country. And this has been adapted by professions. So, for example, the engineering profession and the nursing profession have taken on board capability as an approach, and we have too. And the basic idea is that capability looks at the potential of our profession when it's at its best. It looks to the future at what is possible when we work without barriers or constraints. And it recognizes the needs of three key players in this. First of all, there's us, individuals, and we have our aspirations and we make career choices, and our circumstances vary from time to time. So if I work for one employer, what they want from me may be slightly different from if I work for another employer. So if I work for government, there would be particular capabilities that they would want to be emphasized. If I work for the private sector, then other capabilities would come to the fore. Organizations too have their legitimate requirements from the professionals who work for them. They want to help them to further their organizational objectives, and the profession is ever changing and wants to develop and advance and thrive. So if we put these three sets of requirements from individuals, from organizations and professions together, we can build a really vibrant and dynamic and living capability framework. The key thing about capability is that, as I mentioned before, it recognizes the context in which people operate. So it doesn't say there's only one way we can do things. It recognizes that the practice, say, in China is different from it is in Sweden. The political environment, the press system, and the cultures are varied and need to be taken into account. So frameworks need to be flexible enough, if they're going to be global, to accommodate this, and capability is the approach that does that best. So how did we go about building the framework? Well, here is the rogues gallery of the people who undertook the research. So myself and my brilliant colleague Joanna Fawkes in the UK were privileged to lead the research on this. And then you can see we had partners from 9 countries representing all the inhabited continents of the world. So Professor Gabriel Sardi in Argentina, Professor Huff in Singapore, in Spain, Professor Gutierrez Garcia, in Australia, Dr. Sison and Dr. Katarina Wolf, South Africa, Professor Ronald Rensburg, Sweden, Professor Jesper Folkheimer, Canada, 2 colleagues there, Dr. Amy Furlow and Dr. Alex Sevigny, and in the United States, Professor Katerina Tetsura. And I want to honor these colleagues because they worked very hard to build something that was right for the global profession. I ought to say that each of these academics has experience in working in more than one country. We need it to have if we're going to build a global framework. So, for example, Professor Tetsura, who's based in America, was born in Russia, and she knows the practice very well there and also in Eastern Europe. So what we did was that in each country, we followed the same sort of research protocol to build a country framework, first of all. And in each country, we answered and asked these questions. Is there a set of capabilities that represents our country and that would help then to define the profession globally? What are the variations in each country and region? And how can we make a framework that's of good value to professional development for individuals and at a national and global level? So what my colleagues did was, working with professional associations, practitioners and employers and other academics, they conducted a range of interviews and surveys, discussed with experts to get to the heart of what a vibrant capability framework would look like at each country. And once these country capability frameworks were put together, The whole research team then met for a couple of days to really interrogate what was in common about the frameworks that we collected from the 9 countries. And it wasn't just a matter of saying, oh yes, these are the same sorts of statements. There was a deep interrogation of what the statements actually meant in the context in which they were developed in each country. And then, of course, we had to test these statements. And we did that with those people who'd already been involved in the research, with professional associations. We had a big workshop with the leaders of professional associations from around the world, with the Global Alliance Board, and with anybody who could get to test the framework to make sure that around the world it was representative. And that has now been refined, and we have the global capability framework. So you can see here, these are the 11 capabilities that came together under the 3 headings of the framework. So 11 statements grouped under communication capabilities, organizational capabilities, and professional capabilities. So just to explain the difference, so the 4 communication capabilities are those capabilities that we as professionals have because we are communication specialists. So this is our functional expertise. We might not be the only people who communicate within our organization, but we have formal responsibility for communication within our organizations, rather like financial people don't always do budgets these days, but they have formal responsibility for budgets within their organization. So what do we contribute as communication specialists? Then there are 3 organizational capabilities. So this is how public relations professionals make a contribution to their particular organization alongside their functional specialist role. And then there are 4 professional capabilities. And these are capabilities that we might share with other high-level professionals within our organizations. So to provide value counsel and be a trusted advisor is one of the things that we do, but then again, so would a financial director or an operations director. And to work within an ethical framework, yes, of course we do. And one of the things that all recognized professionals do is work within an ethical framework. So these 11 capabilities in total describe our role and our contribution as professionals in public relations and communication management. Under each of these main headings, there are 3 or 4 sub-capabilities that actually unpack each of the capabilities, and I'm going to give you just 3 examples of that now. So if we look at the communication capabilities, here they are again, the 4 communication capabilities, aligning communicational strategies with organizational purpose and values, identifying and addressing communication problems proactively, that's crucially important, conducting research, and communicating effectively across a full range of platforms and technologies. You'll notice that none of these capabilities are specific to one of our specialities, such as internal communication or financial public relations. Whatever specialism we're in, we would ascribe to these as capabilities that are particular to us as communication professionals. So just taking one of those specialisms, again, specialist capabilities in communication. One was to align communication strategies with organizational purpose and values. So you can see here that there are 3 sub-capabilities: setting clear objectives aligned to purpose and values and seeing them through, acting as a designer and architect of communication plans which enact the purpose, values, and policies of the organization, understanding how communication can and can't help an organization realize its objectives. So you can see that those 3 unpack that bigger statement. Looking then at organizational capabilities, and there are 3 here, What about facilitating relationships and building trust internally and externally? Building and enhancing organizational reputation, and to provide contextual intelligence. So let's unpack one of those. So this is about building and enhancing organizational reputation. You can see that there are 4 sub-capabilities here: identifying, analyzing, and strategically advising on key issues and risks. Helping the organization define and enact its purpose. Shaping culture and processes. Understanding and managing intangible assets, such as the brand. Sustainability, really, really key things. So those are the 11 capabilities with their sub-capabilities. Professional capabilities. Here they are. Ethical framework being one of the professional sub-capabilities. Here we are, building an organization that actually is responsive to society's expectations. Clarifying the consequences of proposed actions. Understanding and applying ethical frameworks. And recognizing and observing societal obligations. So those then, the last group of professional sub-capabilities, along with organizational and communication capabilities, constitute the full capability set. Now, one thing that we've done alongside these capabilities and the work on that, the research on that, is that we've looked at how we might underpin this with some software to make this absolutely real. So we built some software that actually allows you to test where you are now in terms of your current capabilities and where you might want to be, say, in a year's time or 5 years' time. This is a development framework, as I said right at the beginning. So this software allows you to visualize what your journey might be over a period of time. And you can see here that we've got some software that looks at individual profiles and at team profiles as well. So we wouldn't expect anybody to score 10 out of 10 because that would mean that you'd realize your potential in every dimension. And that is not actually going to be the case. And the truth is that the job that you undertake will mean that you have to emphasize certain capabilities. And maybe if you get promotion, different capabilities will become more important. But this software tool allows you to see where you are now, where you might want to develop to as an individual and as a tool. And this can be really useful, for example, if you're preparing for appraisal or a team development away day, something like that. The individual one here, where I am now, where I might be in 12 months, and this is team member 1, team member 2, and you could see over time and as the team grows where maybe capability requirements remain to be fulfilled. So what I'd like to do now is actually take you to the software and demonstrate the software to you. So let me just minimize that. So you will be given, as a member of an association, a website to go to. And what we would encourage is that associations obtain that website from us. What we do is to ask associations just to get a unique URL for themselves so that we can comply with GDPR requirements. You need to know as an individual that your data is secure, and we do that by each professional association offering this software to its membership as part of its membership offer. So once your professional association is registered, you will get a URL like this. And let me show you what you will see. So you put in the URL and you will be requested, first of all, to join your organization, which is your professional association. You can see this is done very simply. You just give your email address, a password of your choice, which you verify, and then the country where you are based. And that's so that we can link you to your professional association. Once you've done that, you will then be able to log in. And when you log in, you will, I just need to get sight of that at the moment. There we are, log in. You will get this screen here, and all you need to do is to put in your particular email address. This is the one for my demonstration with you. Oops. I'll start again. And you will get this home screen here appear. So just to take you a little bit around the screen here, you will see there's some blue buttons. So the framework introduction is what I've just seen you now. You've just seen now. You can get an introduction to the Global Capabilities project. There's a little button there on getting started, which tells you how to log in and how to get started on the Global Capability Framework. And this is where your organization, your professional organization, will request free access. And all they have to do is to put in an email, the organization name, and the role in the organization, and we can then register you. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there are the 11 capabilities that are listed, the core capabilities. And at the top here, if you ever get lost, all you need to do is press the home screen. And then if you press this second screen, you will get access to the framework. I'll come back to the results and resources in a couple of minutes. So this is set up for you to do your individual assessment. And here again, there's a little blue button which takes you through what I'm going to take you through now on the step-by-step basis. But the first thing that you need to do when undertaking this framework is to choose the development period that you want to look at. Let's say this is a development tool, so what you need to choose from the drop-down menu is a review period. So let's say in a year's time, I want to plot my development for a year's time. And the assessment type is, I can either take the core assessment, which are doing some measures against the 11 capabilities I've shown you, or I can do the full assessment, which is an assessment based on the 37 sub-capabilities. For the means of this demonstration, I'm going to take the core assessment, and I'd suggest that you start off with that too. So then you just press the Start Assessment button, and here you get some sliders, and you're asked to determine whether you're less or more experienced now in each capability and where you would want to be in a year's time. So I'm going to imagine that I'm a practitioner maybe of 2 years standing, and I'll just take you through this quite quickly. So to align communication strategies with organizational purpose and values. Well, to be honest, 2 years in, I'm not too experienced about that. And I'm only responsible for a part of the public relations and communication work, mainly media relations at the moment. So I'm less experienced at that. There's a little cue at the bottom there that you can see to judge whether or not you're more or less experienced. But I'd like to grow a little bit in that. I know that I've got other priorities for next year, but I'd like to learn a bit more about that. So we then go on to the next capability, and you can see on this next capability is about building and enhancing organizational reputation. And yes, I do recognize risks, and I do bring these to the attention of my senior managers, but I don't do all the risk assessment and crisis management for my organization at all. But again, I'd like to do a little bit more and get a bit more experienced on that. So I'm going to put some modest advancement on that in 12 months. To communicate effectively across a full range of platforms and technology, well, do you know what? I'm really good at that because that's my day-to-day job. I do a lot of this. And truth be told, I think I might be a bit better than my boss at this because I'm hands-on all the time, and I'd like to get much better in that. I want to become a really good professional, so I'm going to put some ambitious development targets there. Research, well, no, I don't do much of that, to be honest. And there's another member of my team that does that. So I don't think that's going to be a priority for me next year. I'm not going to put too much development time into this. Developing myself and others, I'm not responsible for other people. I'm a young practitioner, but I do want to develop myself, and I do want to develop considerably. So I'm going to put some good development markers down there. Okay, building relationships of trust. Well, I'm the one who's in day-to-day contact, so yeah, that's important for me, and I do want to get better and better at that. And the next one, which is tackling communication problems proactively. Well, I do that, but as I say, I'm not very adept at risk and issues management, so that's an area I could do with being developed on. So I'm going to be ambitious on that one as well. Leadership, no, not too experienced. I'm a junior member of staff, and I recognize that. So I do want to get some leadership training, but I'm going to be modest in my ambitions. Providing contextual intelligence, I do understand what's happening outside the organization. I'm not all that good at joining up all the dots, so I do need some development on that as well. Providing counsel, well, no, that's more my bosses, and I think really it's going to take me several years to do that, so I'm not going to be too outrageous in my demands for development on that. And working within an ethical, you know, I'm hot on ethics, and very often it's me who's questioning the ethics, so I'm going to score myself quite highly on that. I think I'm pretty good at that. So now just press save and finish. And what happens is that you will get some results displayed to you automatically. Here we go. So this is how I've judged my capabilities now. I get a radar chart there. So let's just look at that. If you hover over that, yeah, ethics, I was strong on that. I said I was strong on that. I said I was pretty good as well at communicating across a range of platforms, and also at facilitating relationships. So yeah, that's good shape for me. But what I'd like to look at is where I'm going to be in a year's time. So what I'm going to put on here is my score date for a year's time. 12 months time, where do I want to be? And that's it. So you can see that this is a development plan that I would like. I want to do some more work. I'm good at ethics, but I want to do some more work on developing ethical capability. I'm good at doing the business of communicating across platforms. More on that, please. And I'd like to do some more work on developing relationships. So these areas here, which is about research and around developing communication strategy, those are not areas that I feel that I ought to spend a lot of time this year on, but maybe into the future. Now, a really good way to use this framework is for me to do this assessment of what I am like now and where I'd like to be in a year, and for my manager to do this, because that could open up some interesting discussions. Maybe where my manager rates me now is different from where I would rate myself. Maybe they think I'm actually stronger in some of these areas, or not so good as what I think I am. And maybe the development plans that I have are not in line with what they would like to have for me. So it's a really good way to use this framework, getting ready for discussions about your personal development. Okay, now I want to show you the team assessment. So I said this page was set up for individual assessments. So going on to the team assessment guide then, just click onto that. I'll just mute the sound for a minute. And to go to the team manager screen to set up a team assessment, I need to just click here on this little yellow word. And this sets up my team. I'm not going to do that comprehensively here because it takes a little time. But what you do is you create a new team. You send emails to those people who you want to be in your team. They accept them, and then they will undertake their individual profiles, just as I've done, and then we can look at the results of that. So if I go to the results button here, little bit slow this afternoon, but we will get there just now. So this is me, if you remember. So this is how I've just assessed myself. So I now add some data. Another one comes in, and I've got a team of people who I've invited, and I've accepted my invitation. So Pete's profile is like this. So he's got quite a different profile from me, and he looks as if he's really quite expert in an area where I'm weak, which is about aligning communication strategies. But let me add another member of the team. And so let's have a look at Megan and how she's assessed herself. Well, that's interesting. She is very, very strong at this area, as am I, which is about working within an ethical framework. And I'll add just one more team member. So this time I will add Julie. There we are. Now this is really interesting. If you look at this, I did this actually with a team just before Christmas, and we were meant to spend about half an hour on this, and we spent well over an hour discussing what the implications of the profiles that they generated meant for the team. You'll see for this team, they're relatively weak in these areas here, which is about enhancing organizational reputation, providing valued counsel, and also in this area of providing contextual intelligence. And these are very strategic dimensions of the capability framework. This is when you will be working with the most senior people in the organization, whereas some of these other areas here are more tactical, working across communication platforms and facilitating relationships, very important. But that tells me something about the team. And it may be that if I'm planning to recruit somebody else, I might need to have somebody with quite a different profile. So if I add somebody else on here as a new team member, and let's have a look who that might be. So suppose Janet joins us, then she's beginning to fill in some of these gaps here. And you can see how this then builds a rich picture where we can have discussions about strength in depth of the team. So we've got quite a lot of strength there. But if a team who is represented by the black line, so if Julie ever leaves the team, we're going to be left very weak on research because we don't have strength in that area at all. And we're still lacking in some of these areas here. So you can see that this is a really rich source of discussion for both individuals and for teams. And then what we might ask ourselves is, well, that's fine, Anne, thank you. We've got those profiles now. What do we do about developing ourselves? Well, this is where your associations come in, because if you go to the resources tab and just tap on that, and I'm grateful to the Chartered Institute of Public Relations here in the UK and to the PRINS Institute of Public Relations in New Zealand for helping me populate this. You can see here there's the guides for individual and team assessments, and under here we've got some resources under each of the capability headings. So aligning communication strategies with purpose and values. There's a skills guide here provided by the CIPR on corporate responsibility, looking at under the communicating effectively. Then there's a webinar on PR tools, which is really, really helpful. So let's just click through to one of these and see what we've got. So let's have a look at the corporate responsibility guide. So this is going live now to the site of the CIPR. So I'll just put in my username. And also my password for the CIPR. And sign in. And there we are. I'm straight to that corporate social responsibility skills guide, and I can just download that when I wish. Now, some other institutes have decided to do things a little differently. So if I go to the PRINS course events calendar, and again, this is going to their live site now. You can see that because unfortunately it's the time of the COVID pandemic. But suppose I go to this one, how to be an influencer within your organization. So that's about being a strategic advisor and counselor, trusted advisor. And what they've done in New Zealand is to link all the skills and knowledge that you will gain on this course to the professional capability framework here, okay? To provide counsel and be a trusted advisor, organizational leader, be ethical, and to develop yourself. So that's a couple of ways in which professional organizations use the resources. So that is the global capability framework. What I'd like now to do is just go back to a couple of slides to finish off this webinar. So I've demonstrated the capabilities to you, and the feedback that we've had from a number of sources has suggested that there are lots of uses for the capability framework. First of all, to review team strengths, and you can see how that would happen. Secondly, to draft job ads. So these capability statements and their sub-capabilities are really good elements to put in a job advert when you're looking for particular types of people with particular profiles of capability. To help prepare for an appraisal or promotion, so where are my strengths and weaknesses? How do I need to develop? What do I need to do to develop? To argue for more responsibilities. And we know that some practitioners have taken the capability framework to their bosses and said, look, you say that this particular area of work should be located within human resources, but here's an independent source that says this is very much within the scope of public relations responsibility. And it's also helpful to set long-term career goals. Say you can do your development up to 5 years. So just drawing to a close then, some conclusions from our webinar. We've noticed that there's a broad alignment on capabilities across the world. It's interesting, actually, we were challenged because some of the capabilities were seen to be almost self-suggesting, and the fact that there wasn't more regional variation. Well, the core of what we do is the same, and so if you take a capability like to communicate across a range of platforms, well, that's going to be the same wherever you are. To be a trusted advisor and counselor, that's going to be the same whether you're in Ghana or whether you're going to be in Vietnam. So there is great commonality amongst our practice around the world. But there are important cultural and geographic maturity differences. I mentioned Vietnam. The profession is very young there. In other parts of the world, such as in Spain, it's been practiced for a long time. So this capability framework accommodates different levels of maturity and different geographies. I mentioned the external point of reference that's useful for us to argue for responsibilities and to define our scope of work. And it helps us personally articulate what our own role is. And it empowers us, practitioners, professional bodies and employers, to decide for yourself and in your context what is appropriate, using these statements in a way that is appropriate to you in your situation. So if you're interested in the research, there's a reference there for the research document that backs up the Global Capabilities Framework, and that's free to you if you go to the website that's indicated there. And that's really all I want to say about the Global Capability Framework. I hope that you found this webinar useful. We know that the framework is being used globally. We're getting good feedback about it, that it's been very helpful in plotting development over periods of time and for associations to be able to group their training and development offerings in a sensible way under the capability headings, or to use it in a way that's appropriate to them. So we would recommend it to you. Thank you for listening today. And our ambition is that our profession fully realizes its potential. And using this capability framework, the only global capability framework that there is, sponsored and supported absolutely by the Global Alliance, we are going to move our profession forward. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.